My girlfriend and I were hosting a New Year's Eve party at my condo. I invited about 30 people and said they could bring whomever they wanted, as long as they were respectful of my place. As we were setting things up for the party, we kept losing things and then finding them back in the same place a few minutes later, like the TV remote, her bag, or just anything we seemed to need at the moment. We thought we were just imagining it, but it kept happening over and over. We figured it was the two of us just accidentally moving stuff without the other knowing. Our guests started showing up between 9 and 10, which was when we told everyone to arrive. Since my friends would be bringing friends, I positioned some of my surveillance cameras in rooms with valuables, such as the living room and the bedrooms. By the time the party was in full swing, things were still kind of disappearing. Like at one point, I wanted to show my friends my new pair of shoes my girlfriend got me for Christmas, and I couldn't find them. And even stranger, my window was left open in my bedroom. But it was a party after all, and I had to assume my girlfriend or some of the guests had moved the stuff, but still, it felt weird. The condo was crowded and I didn't have much time to worry about all of this. I told myself I'd check the surveillance footage after the party, maybe even before the end of the night if something really expensive went missing. There were a handful of faces I didn't recognize, but I met most of them through my own friends who brought them. It was approaching that time of the night, the one that people either couldn't wait for or thoroughly dreaded, the stroke of midnight, and we all started to gather around the TV to watch the ball drop in Times Square. I looked around the room and noticed a tall guy in a black trench coat facing the wall opposite the TV. He looked down at the couch, doing something, but I couldn't tell what. I was about to ask my friend Willis if he knew who that was, but everyone started counting down, so I turned my attention to that and joined in. After we all yelled Happy New Year, and anyone who came as a couple got their New Year's kiss, I looked around and realized that the tall guy wasn't in the room anymore. I asked Willis if he knew who that man was, and he said, yeah, that's Robbie's friend. So that was that. One of my friend's girlfriends eventually came downstairs and said whoever the guy in the trench coat was, he wasn't leaving the bathroom. I told her it was Robbie's friend and to just use the one in the master. So she went back upstairs. Eventually, the clock hit 2 a.m. Things started dwindling down, and people began to leave. When everyone was gone, my girlfriend and I said we'd clean up tomorrow. But first, we did a quick inspection to make sure nothing was stolen. Her bag was gone this time, and so was one of my expensive watches. We rushed to check the footage and started the playback at the time guests began to arrive. I had it on fast forward, and we just skimmed all 3 cameras. Eventually, we noticed Robbie's friend in the trench coat in the guest bedroom going through our stuff. I paused the footage in a fit of rage, cut it into a 30-second clip, and then texted Robbie saying, "Your friend stole shit from my apartment, bro." He texted back, "Dude, no way, what do you mean?" Then, I sent him the footage. A minute later, he texted, "Who the hell is that? I don't know who that is." I wrote back, "I was told that was your friend." Once again, he said, "Dude, I don't know that guy." Now my girlfriend and I got really nervous, so I went on a texting spree, texting all my friends who came, asking if they knew who that person was. From everyone still awake, we got a bunch of no's. We went through all the video footage, following the guy in the trench coat as he entered our bedroom, opened the door, and started dropping some of our belongings out the window, including my girlfriend's bag. I felt like the room was spinning, and my heart lodged in my throat as I watched the man in the video quickly turn around as if he heard someone coming, and then crawl under the bed. We sped through the rest of the video footage. He never comes out from under the bed that we were sitting on now. I saw the fear in my girlfriend's eyes and her temptation to scream, but I covered her mouth with my hand and whispered in her ear, "Run on the count of 3. She took off, and I followed close behind, glancing under the bed before slamming the door shut. He was under there. We made eye contact. The feeling that gripped me was indescribable. We called the cops from the kitchen as we both clutched big carving knives for protection. The police made it to my condo in about 3 minutes, but by then, the intruder was gone, and our bedroom window was again open. He'd escaped through it and got away with all our stuff. I handed over the video footage to the police. They said they would review it and run the man's face through the system. Of course, he was never found, at least not that we heard. Happy New Year to us. Four of my buddies and I were invited to a friend's house for New Year's. He lived about 20 to 30 minutes outside Waco, in a rural community with houses on 1 to 2 acre lots, mostly all dirt roads off the main one. I was the designated driver that night. 3 of my friends wanted to rage hard and decided they would crash at the party house instead of going back to town. The 4th one, who wasn't drinking that much, headed back into the city with me. We ended up leaving about 1:30 a.m. We were nearly home when I got a call from one of the guys we left behind saying that there had been a fight at the party. Everyone was going home instead of staying the night, and he asked us to come back and pick them up. He gave me a different address because everyone bolted when things got crazy, and they ended up at some friend of a friend's place in that same area. The GPS doesn't work well once you get outside Waco and aren't on the main roads, at least not with the phone service I had back then. I could get the general area of where we were going, but the exact location would pop up and then disappear on the screen. And even then, it seemed to point to nothing on a street in the middle of nowhere. We pulled down a side road to turn around and try to get enough service to call and figure out where this house was. By this time, it was around 2:30 a.m., and we soon discovered this access road had another car on it. An old pickup truck with a big light kit on the roof was just idling there, with 2 guys who looked to be in their late 20s sitting inside. I remember thinking it seemed like something you'd see in a TV show or horror movie, just a creepy-looking pickup sitting in the middle of the road at 3 a.m. I didn't know what those guys were up to, but I was guessing nothing good. We had to pass them to turn around. As we did, their gazes followed us in a way that gave me the creeps. I did the fastest 3-point turn of my life, then passed them again on the way back to the main road. The driver leaned his head out the window like he wanted us to stop so they could ask for something. Since it was nearly 3 a.m., I had enough sense to just keep driving. My friend in the passenger seat, who had been trying to get a hold of the others with no luck, tried mapping it out again. The GPS, struggling to find a signal, finally spit out a route, but it was too late for us to make the turn it had instructed us to take. I pulled over to check out how far back we had to go. We weren't sitting there for more than half a minute when that pickup pulled up next to us on my driver's side and rolled down the window. The guy leaned his head out and asked if we'd seen a white Dodge pickup truck come by. I told him we hadn't. He said, "Okay, thanks," in a way that was normal enough for me to feel ridiculous for fearing this person, and so I asked him for directions. He told me to take the first street on the left, back the way we came, which was exactly what the GPS had said before it lost the signal again. I thanked the guy, wished him a happy new year, and spun the car around. In my rearview mirror, I noticed they had pulled out too and started following us. I drove about half a mile before making the turn he had indicated. It was a bumpy gravel road that immediately forked off in 2 directions. The right went straight for a short while and then up a slight hill. The left went down a small incline, which is the way we went. The road was narrow, only big enough for 1 car, and lined with trees and shrubs on both sides for a good distance. We hadn't traveled very far before we noticed a sign warning us of a dead end up ahead. My nerves went haywire. I had been right about those guys the first time. I glanced back to see the pickup truck with its spotlights glaring come in behind us. My blood turned cold, and I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. They had followed us, and they were coming up fast, frighteningly fast for a bumpy dirt road. I sped up, but they slammed into the back of my car, pulled away, then rammed me again a few seconds later. Salvation came in the form of a small clearing, like a dirt cul-de-sac or something. I had just enough room to pull forward, then reverse, flipping around to face the direction we'd just come. But they had stopped and blocked the single-lane dirt road, penning us in. The driver jumped out and shouted, "You're on the wrong road, asshole! Get out of the car!" He positioned himself directly in front of us, about 10 to 15 feet away from his pickup. Meanwhile, the other guy got out and started walking up to my passenger side, where my friend was. They kept shouting for us to get out. They knew they had us cornered. They knew they could wait us out. What they didn't know was that this wasn't my car. It belonged to my now drunk friend who thought I was coming back to pick him up. His was the only one that would fit us all that night. I gunned it right at the guy in front of me, trying to run him over. Stunned, he just barely managed to jump out of the way. Not giving a shit if I scratched up either car, I squeezed between the trees and his truck. Metal wailed, and I'm pretty sure some sparks flew as I sped out of there, returned to the main road, and headed straight back home. If you get invited to the middle of nowhere on New Year's Eve, don't bring your own car. It just might save your life.
I was 21 years old and had recently gotten a job working at the local CVS. It was pretty average and mostly boring, but that was about to change. As the new hire, I got stuck with the New Year's Eve closing shift. I'd be the only one working until the store closed at midnight. Normally, during the day, it would typically be busy, at least busy enough to stay in business. Then, at night, traffic would slow to almost nothing. It was pretty rare to see customers past 9 o'clock. On New Year's Eve, my shift started at 4, and it was surprisingly busy for the first few hours. Mainly just last-minute purchases by people looking to stock up on champagne and other liquor. It wasn't until 10 that things started to die down. That's also when the pharmacy closed, meaning I'd be alone at the register up front for 2 hours. During that first hour, I rang up a total of 1 customer. By 11 o'clock, I was getting excited for my shift to end. I was losing my mind with boredom. Suddenly, there was a very faint tap on the window. It was subtle, almost accidental, like a zipper grazing the glass. Peering out, I saw a man draped in a heavy coat, his hood casting a shadow over his face, his stare piercing through the darkness. After an uncomfortably long moment, he walked over to the entrance and entered the store. He glared at me as he walked past and disappeared behind the shelves. Then, 5 minutes later, that same tapping noise began again. It sounded like it was coming from the snack aisle. Staying behind the counter, I walked a little to the right to check it out. Nobody was there. The tapping was so consistent and deliberate that I knew that man was making the noise on purpose. But where was it coming from? I didn't know, but I had a sudden urge to go to the bathroom. Boredom and a display of energy drinks will do that to a girl. Only problem, I wasn't supposed to go when there was a customer in the store, and I was the only one working. 10 minutes or so passed without me laying eyes on the guy, but I occasionally heard that weird tapping noise moving between the aisles. It got to the point that I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out from behind the counter and said, excuse me? I started walking down the rows, but the man was nowhere to be seen. And still, every aisle I entered, I would hear the noises coming from the next one over. Almost as if he was playing some bizarre hide-and-seek game with me. I turned down the candy aisle and heard some of the leftover Christmas sleigh bells jingling on the other side of the shelf, like someone was intentionally shaking them. I tried to peek through the tiny holes in the back to see if I could catch a glimpse of him. What I saw was completely unexpected and horrifying. It was a pair of eyes staring back at me through those same tiny holes. Even worse, those eyes moved away and entered the aisle where I was standing. The man was making these weird noises, like a child or someone who had just escaped a mental institution. He started laughing and doing this weird tiptoe, kinda hopping over to me. It was as disturbing as it sounds. He was approaching me so fast that I actually began backing up in fear for my life. He followed, still doing his weird hopping. I hurried back to the front of the store ready to call my manager or the cops. When I turned back, he was frozen at the end of the first aisle, maybe 20 feet away from me. His goofy, eerily happy face had turned into an aggressive, angry stare of hostility. That's when I was done. I hurried to the front door, and to my horror, the man started charging at me. No more weird hopping around this time. He was sprinting in my direction. I ran outside, but was too afraid to go to my car because I feared he'd get to me before I could unlock it. So I raced around back and in through the service entrance. I didn't know if he was still on my tail or not, but I locked the door behind me and hurried to the front, where I locked that one too. I picked up the phone on the counter and called my manager, who was fortunately not too plastered yet. I told him I'd have to leave immediately because there was this crazy dude at the store freaking me out. That's when I heard it, coming from one of the aisles. It was the tapping again, inside the building that I'd just locked myself into. I threw the phone down and ran out. I was in my car within 20 seconds, where, stuck to my side mirror, was a post-it note scribbled with a smiley face. I didn't even bother ripping it off. I peeled out of there and never looked back. I called my manager when I got home, and he called the cops. Surprisingly, nothing was missing from the store, besides a few unaccounted for energy drinks. I chalked that up to payment for pain and suffering and being freaked the hell out. That was after I was fired for leaving the place open as I ran for my life. My New Year's resolution: don't work the night shift.
Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.